Michelle here.
Daniel, OG
OG
Rose. That was pretty close. That was pretty close to synchronized. That's not bad. My gosh, kids are asleep.
No, just kidding.
Yeah, with a monitor. I mean, unless they've gotten really good at keeping their feet muffled as they walk, which is possible. I mean, usually by now Haven would be shouting, Grace, Grace, let's go outside, Grace. And she would be asleep.
She does love to sleep like me.
Well, there's nothing wrong with that.
Like all of us, I suppose.
There's a doctor at the school who says it's like the secret fountain of youth, live forever or something. So, you'll probably live forever. It works out.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Excellent. So tonight we are going to discuss if what is the meaning of my life doesn't work, try what do I find beautiful.
Yeah. There's a lot of talk today about having a meaningful life. Live meaningful, don't just work for money, have a purpose. Daniel Pink, Victor Frankl, we've all heard it. Millennials know it, live for purpose. But often when you ask, what is the meaning of my life? You just kind of look down at your feet and you go, oh, I don't know. And so that advice just kind of leaves you looking around. And then you do some introspection and you go, well, what do I like to do? Is it what I like to do the same as what is meaningful to me? Is what I'm good at what's meaningful to me? And there's a lot of questions that are left hanging. And then people go, well, I have a lot of likes. There's a lot of different things that I like to do. Which one should be the thing that I, devote 4 years of school to? And so there's a lot of questions that people are left with that the advice, that live for purpose, not money, doesn't necessarily guide people on. And there's a lot of great books. Daniel Pink, Drive, I love that, on intrinsic motivation versus extrinsic motivation. Obviously, Man's Search for Meaning by Victor Frankl. This is not to say that the emphasis on meaning is wrong.
Right.
But it's to say that a lot of people don't necessarily know where to take that question. Have you had experiences with that?
Yeah, no, I think it's definitely, sometimes it's almost like, the analogy you often talk about with, the centipede walking, and then you ask him like, how many legs do you have? And
how do you use all those legs?
Yeah, exactly. And then it just like freezes. So I think that's what happens, or almost, I don't know, it's almost like the Three Stooges effect too, that I do, like everyone's trying to go through the door, then they just like plop over. So I think there's definitely, somehow it's very ironic that the idea of trying to search for that, or trying to answer that question, or you really be, when someone's really eagerly looking for that, it's almost harder to find, it's harder to find the meaning. And I think too, like you're saying, there's all these potentialities. I know I can stay in that world of potentialities, and then it's very fuzzy and challenging. You almost feel like, I don't know, it's almost anxiety producing.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Because you think, there's all these things that I would like
it's like
to
meaning stress, because you're like, oh no, I don't have meaning, and if I don't have meaning, my life's going to be meaningless, and I'm going to be miserable, and then you're stressed out. It's like it can be a new form of stress.
Yeah. Oh well, I definitely think that could be 100% true. That it's actually almost by being so almost hyperly aware of meaning. Yeah. In a sense, it almost makes us stressed about it.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Because we almost just feel like we have to somehow fill it out, or give it some sort of definition, or make it some sort of concrete thing, meaning.
Right.
And then it ends up just feeling very, we feel inadequate to do so.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Well, because if I just come up to you and say, make sure your life has meaning, and then just keep going, you go, I did. You may go, I thought I had meaning, maybe I don't. The very question for some people may cause them to step out of meaning because they become overly aware of it. That's a theoretical possibility. Because then it also gets mixed up where people start going, well, is my meaning meaningful enough? Maybe I find meaning in growing coffee, or I find meaning in my family, or I find meaning in my business or entrepreneurship that I'm starting, that is trying to maybe give people better fitting suits or clown costumes, as we mentioned in Meta Talks. And then people go, oh, well, that meaning's not significant enough. And so you can almost have a status anxiety about meaning. So there's a lot of dimensions to the question of what it means to get meaning in your life that are not necessarily addressed, or at least you don't have enough information to figure out what meaning you should invest in, what you should do. If you don't already know, look, I mean, if you just had the creative impulse and just were doing photography ever since you were a kid, you might be lucky in the sense of you just kind of had an intuition, a sense of what you found meaningful and you kept doing it and it became your thing. So you may be lucky that way. But often those people can sometimes almost retrospectively create a narrative where they did a lot of hard introspection and figured out what was meaningful for them, and you need to do the same, when really it's almost that they stumbled into it and then they retrospectively add a narrative that makes it like a great Buddhist awakening or journey to the East or something like that.
Well, I mean, even for people who are really wildly successful, say with some photography business or some sort of, I think those people are not, they're still susceptible.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
to the problem, even in being successful.
Yeah, where they feel like it was a waste,
even if they feel like, if there has been meaning in what they're doing, it's not to say they will have that moment, but they could have that moment where they say, well, what is it all for?
Yeah, what's it all mean?
And sometimes the greater the success of it, the more like they're doing really well in it, the greater the kind of the emptiness that they might realize is also there.
Well, because there's that paper we did on like whole hope, HOLE, and when you before you reach the top, you can kind of, because there's an absence of being at the top, you can imagine what it's like up there, and you can imagine the meaning gets better. But once you get to the top, there's no space anymore. There's no HOLE holes anymore to idolize. So then you really have to accept that. Oh my gosh, it's
like I made it, but it still doesn't feel like I thought it would.
It doesn't feel like it. I made it, but it doesn't feel like it. So there's all these pitfalls because maybe you pursued all that and it was meaningful to you, but you got to the top and then it turned out that maybe it wasn't a deep meaning, only a horizontal meaning, a more shallow meaning.
Sure.
Maybe it was a purpose but not a meaning. You can get into all of these distinctions. So then the question becomes, how do you avoid such a mistake? How do you increase your chances of not making that kind of mistake?
Sure.
And then if you're someone who, when you ask yourself the question, what do I find meaningful in life, you can't necessarily find an answer. Right. There might be a better question that one can ask themselves that might at least help send them in the direction to start to answer it. If they don't find the question, what do you find meaningful, helpful? If that question kind of loses its power to sort of create new thought, the point of the paper is to maybe ask yourself, what do you find beautiful?
I really wanted to say drum roll, please, and
drum.
Yes,
beautiful. We left the Congo drum in the djembe or the djembe. It's in the closet. Dang it. Yeah. Shoot.
It's okay. It was still a very wonderful moment.
Okay. Yeah. When we got there. Yeah. Shoot. We really should have had drums or violins or Beethoven's Knives, Joy to the World. I don't know.
Yeah, but what is beautiful? I mean, this is a great redirection. It's funny. I don't know. I'm trying to really. I think that when you are sort of just busy with your projects, and that's kind of how I see life at this point in life, is to just be busy with projects. It's interesting to think about that being such a source of anxiety. Like, what is my meaning? Because it's like when you're kind of just busy with stuff, you're not really. I don't know, you're just not really thinking about it, I guess.
Well, that's where you're not. It's like the paradox of awareness. Like, you're not overly aware of your meaning. You're not overly aware of the fact that you're doing something meaningful because you're just in it. It becomes just sort of the horizon which you live. It doesn't become a conscious thought. This
is interesting because, as you're saying that, it makes me almost feel like, there's all good intentions. And like you said, there's a great thing in asking what is meaningful, how do you live a meaningful life? But it's also, there's something, I think maybe I can hesitate with that because I almost feel like, who am I to really say that like what I'm doing is necessarily meaningful to others? I can't know that really, but I can know if I care to do it. Like, do I want to do it? Do I enjoy doing it? Mm-hmm. Does it mean something to me? Like, you know what I mean? I feel like that's a very subtle distinction, but I think maybe that could help with the question too. Now, because I think a lot of times, like, what do I find, like, how do I have meaning in my life? Mm. A lot of times we think about that in terms of this like large umbrella term of meaning. Yeah. Where it's like, well, what do I find meaningful? No, and that's where the beauty thing comes in though. But
I think that's very important because, step one, are you asking what is a meaningful life, which might be prone to status anxiety and the observations of outside parties. Exactly. Versus, that would not be the right question. It's almost the worst version of the question. What is a meaningful life? The second version of the question that can be helpful is, what do I find meaningful? Because now you're talking about, I'm going to do it even if other people don't think much of it, and so then you're moving toward intrinsic motivation as opposed to extrinsic motivation, where you're motivated to do a thing, even if you don't get any money or praise or status or anything. So that's quite good.
Right.
But the point that we're getting at is sometimes even that question isn't clear enough for people because they're not sure what they find meaningful, because they're not sure how to tell the difference between what they like, how to weigh all the different factors of liking, meaning.
Maybe stuff that used to be meaningful is not meaningful anymore.
Yeah, that's correct.
For some strange, mysterious reason, and maybe that I think the reinvigoration of that, again, I just keep on thinking it's like just getting you recentered, like when you're doing pottery, like on a pottery wheel, it's beauty. Yes. If you think about what's beautiful. I mean, what would you say, Daniel? What is it about beauty that can make somebody be like, oh, now I actually feel meaning in something?
Well, it's like if I ask you, instead of asking what do you find meaningful, if I ask you what do you find beautiful? There's something about beautiful, or you could get it glorious. You could even bring in that term if you wanted, where it's like when you think back on your life and you go, oh, I found it, I really found it special. There was like an extraordinary moment, when I was walking in the woods, or, when I reached the top of that mountain, or when I really finally finished. It's interesting, like when we were down in New Orleans, putting flooring in on all the housing, there was something with Mr. Bartley, and there was something about that experience that was very beautiful, that was really neat, and you're just putting floors down because you're making something with your hands, and there was something that was beautiful about that. Not just meaningful, but something wonderful, because you're trying to build something back, and it felt higher. Yeah. And so when I think about like, what do you find meaningful? Well, those times with Mr. Dilla Big T, that was meaningful experiences, right? That was something special. And likewise, when all the elements come together in a story into something, that's really where you feel it all coming together, and you're like, yes, it works. So for me, I think the question is good, because you can kind of think back on your life, and because instead, I guess when I think, what do I find meaningful? I think about like what I like to do, and that feels so shallow. There's something so almost even egotistical and selfish about it.
Well, that's what I was kind of getting at too when I said before. It's almost like, who am I to define the meaningfulness for other people? There's something about it where it's almost just it does kind of feel like it feels like it's placing something that is actually the essence of meaningfulness to a term that can be used in very superficial ways. Yeah,
it could be captured by systems too, right?
I mean, not necessarily, but it could be.
Oh yeah, but when you think of like what's beautiful, what was beautiful in your life, those moments entailed doing. Those moments entailed skills. Those moments entailed activities. But they felt like you were participating in something more than yourself. And also there was a joy in that. There was there could be hard work in it, but there was a joy in that. There was a sense of being doing something that it's interesting, because it also feels like you're doing something that only you can do, that only you in that moment could have done or were there to do. I mean, maybe not literally. I'm sure other people could have put in floors. But there's something that feels like it was very married to your particularity being there. Yeah. So that's another thing that's nice about beauty, is it's like you there's an individuation. Your experience of beauty is conditioned by you. And it just becomes easier to think of, and then when the question that follows, if you say, well, would those be things that you would want to do, if you had the choice to do those things with your life? Are those things you'd want to do? You go, well, absolutely. Nobody hesitates to add beauty to your life. But if I ask you, do you want to do ASL with your life? Do you want to do photography with your life? Do you want to do running a venue with your life? You kind of stop and think about it. You're like, I'm good at it. I like it, but all the time. You're much more hesitant. But when you ask yourself the question, would you do those things that you found beautiful? You're like, oh yeah. Absolutely, I would. And so if you feel less paralyzed.
Yeah, that's interesting. I was thinking about the word meaning, and how to me, it also relates to the word definition, which, is, like a definition of
high definition.
Yeah, but it's also like, it's like the definedness. You're saying these particularities. I think beauty is very good at that, individuating.
Yeah, beauty definitely helps define because it's experience based.
Exactly.
Where meaning can be
meaning
skill based. It can be what you do, which is all general, because it's like separating the work from the experiences in which the work is exercised. It's almost treating the work or your likes as an abstraction. It's kind of D-world. I've been thinking about that. You have disembodied. I've been thinking about like Disworld. And like it's kind of so it's like it feels very Disworld.
Well, that's true because let's say you hear that kind of language of like, did you find meaning in this? Where it's like it's almost something separate you add on, or it's almost like something you have to find in something, even though you didn't experientially have the meaning. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Whereas the beauty
absolutely.
is extremely. There's something more phenomenological. There's like actually an experience of
it's very
beauty.
world.
Yeah,
it's
very
not
world and grounded.
Disworld.
that's
Disembodied
so true.
Disworld.
It's very, very grounded. Yeah, that's so true. That's a really great point.
And so then it becomes much easier. So then if you if you think back in your life and maybe you have 6 experiences that were beautiful, and then you're asking yourself, what do I want to do with my life? Well, one of them, let's say, walking in the woods. Well, you say, well, I can't make money walking in the woods. Probably, unless I want to be a park ranger. Maybe you can. But maybe where you live, that's not an option.
That guy who walks in the woods with a Patreon.
Yeah, so yeah, I shouldn't talk so quick. Someone's going to hear this. Someone's going to hear this, and he's like, "Oh, if only they knew how much you can get paid just to film yourself walking through the woods." People tune in at lunch and they find it relaxing. Apparently, there are people that film themselves eating their lunch and they make a lot of money because people tune in and they don't feel alone. So, a guy walking in the woods is probably a pretty good bet for a patron.
Yeah.
If I were to. But you look, so you go, oh well, maybe not walking in the woods, but you go, oh, but putting in floors, for people in need. That was beautiful. And say, oh well, in my area, that there's a need for that. And you go, oh, and that could maybe there would be a paycheck that would help me pay my bills. And you can so then you can start moving to practical considerations, but you feel like you're moving into practical considerations from a much more concrete place, as opposed to a vague place of a skill that you have or an ability that you have. Where you say, oh, I found it beautiful when we had those events at Unoya, where you start, oh well, is there somewhere in the area that needs an event manager or something? You see, well, you can say, and it probably will not be exactly the same.
Right, and it may not always be able to feed into a job necessarily.
No, it may not.
It might not.
Oh no!
But it's still the fact that you can create it. Like
you could create it, and then if you know that, oh well, what I find beautiful is maintaining a garden. Yeah. Well, then you say, okay, well, there's I'll get a job that will pay the bills here, and when I come home, I'll work in the garden. And it's actually amazing that if you do that, even though your work is not directly tied to the thing you find beautiful, it actually almost reaches over and fills your day job with a sense of meaning, because it's a thing you do in order to get home to do the garden, to do the thing you find beautiful. So it feels like it's part of a story. Yeah. So it kind of reaches through your whole life and fills the whole thing with meaning, even if the work itself is not directly the thing that you find meaneful and beautiful.
But it equips it.
It equips it. It makes it possible, so it feels part of a story. That's the other kind of advantage. Like you don't. To your point, Michelle, like these people are very, very bent on making sure they get a paid job that they find meaningful. But they really shouldn't worry so much if that's not an option. Exactly. Because as long as they can find that thing that's beautiful and meaningful, it reaches through their entire life and makes it all feel part of a beautiful story. So it can have that sort of effusing, that sort of reaching effect.
Yeah. Sorry, oatmeal.
No, you gotta eat oatmeal.
Man, I love oatmeal. But the point I was going to say about beauty, it makes me think about, if you see somebody who's really beautiful, a person, you think about, it's hard to stop thinking about them, right? Sure. You're like, just kind of can't get that beautiful image of that person out of your head. I guess it just makes me think about, somebody could still feel like, well, I find a lot of things beautiful. Maybe they're trying to narrow it down to figure out what they really want to be honing in on. Sure. And I think it's kind of sometimes the thing that you just can't get out of your head. In a good way.
Absolutely.
Like, and I think
it's not mere pretty. And one could say you could go to the paper on beauty to get a clearer definition of what is beauty, so you can start trimming down your options. But I like that point. Like, you can't get it out of your head, or maybe you could say it's one of those events of which the story of your life would feel like an entirely different story or incomplete without.
And I think, you know, for us, we with writing and things, you know, and even fiction or I think there are times, I think we could both agree, where there are just things you've seen or experienced where you're like, I have to kind of somehow articulate that.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know, even if it's just a memorandum to it or
Yeah,
something.
sure.
So yeah, I mean, I think beauty is a great guide.
Heuristic,
You know,
a
it's
guide.
a great guide.
Yeah, and also too, as you do something that you find beautiful, it also increases your capacity to experience more beauty, of which then increases, you know, then you see more beauty, and that increases your capacity. So then it becomes a self-feeding. So that's another reason, you know, where people talk about having meaning in their life, feeling like they always have something to look forward to. Beauty does have this symbiotic relationship. It does have this thing where it's feeding and it grows and it gets better with time, and that's one of the reasons purpose is so important too. But to create intrinsic motivation and to motivate more intrinsic motivation.
Right. I thought of two images while I thought about this like beautiful like long hair. I don't know, I just had this image in my head. Sorry, I'll have to sketch it out. But basically, she just is like guiding someone through like the like glowing woods toward like a light. So it's like, oh, this is interesting. Like, is beauty guiding us, or is it the thing we're walking toward, or is it both? Does it kind of somehow do both? Because it's like guiding you toward meaning, but often like we kind of go toward beauty, like we're like moths to a light, you know.
Sure.
So then I thought about like a lighthouse. So a lighthouse, in a way, is like, to me, it's almost like just look for the lighthouse, you know, look for the beauty, go toward that. And then, you know, that the meaning in that is like the purpose. There's this, well, you've got this very, you know, there's an objective, you know, of where you're going, and you want to, because you want to see like what you're going to find there, discover. And then when you get there, you know, you're on like this new land, basically, which gives you a very like solid footing for, you know, what the rest of the rest that you're going to do, you know. I don't know, maybe it's not the perfect analogy, because it could feel very like finite, like, oh, you've arrived, you know.
But then like it's part of the story. I mean, you take a road to get to a place, you know. I guess it's Wendell somewhere where he says, you know, at some point one must stop on a road and turn it into a place. And there's something about beauty where it's bringing you to a place. But the thing is, the place that beauty brings you to is a place you'll want to stay.
Exactly.
As opposed to the place that money perhaps takes you to, would be a place that you get to and you go, oh, this is it? I need to go. You know? I need to go now. I need to do, or status or different things. I mean, really.
Yeah, there seems to be something like a little bit about adventure too.
There is something adventurous, you know,
something
about beauty.
Like worthwhile that was hard, but also really good.
Well, I mean, you could link with beauty words like wonder, beauty, glory. You know, those are all those are descriptors of a similar thing. Where when you could ask yourself, maybe perhaps instead of asking yourself, what do you find beautiful? Maybe you say, what do you find wondrous? What do you find glorious? You know, what do you find higher? You know, there's different language. I mean, the poet is kind of in the business of looking for a metaphor that's going to kind of break through and make something ordinary new again. You know, Dawn has that keychain and Turn the World, where she's trying to find the right description of the floaters in order to make them make sense.
Yes.
And so likewise, these are these different aesthetic terms that can make the question, what is meaning, that has ceased to have the power to make us think new thoughts, to transform it so that we can have new thoughts and new guidance for ourselves, so that we can live a life that is on a road that when we arrive at the place where we stop, it will be somewhere that we want to be, not somewhere we want to leave.
Yeah, 100%, Daniel. Well, thank you. This has been great.
Good.
This has been great.
Oatmeal was good. What has got coconut?
Oh yes, I make a special oatmeal. If you want my recipe, let me know in the comments.
There we go. Yeah, let us know in the comments. Seriously. Yeah,
it's a really great oatmeal recipe.
It's beautiful.
It is beautiful.
It's wondrous in different things.
Oh yes, but no, this is great. I really hope that you guys enjoyed the conversation.
This has been very nice. Thank you for your time.
Yes, thank you indeed.
For more, please
look
visit.
For the beauty.
Yeah, go find it. You know, ask yourself, what do you find beautiful? For more, please visit ogrose.com, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, list off 100 more.
Parlor,
Parlor, oh gosh.
Telegram.
Just list them all. Just hope
like
they go look. They're gonna go into Telegram. Is that one? Oh my gosh.
Yahoo, MySpace.
Yeah, just click them all and be like, please like it. Just subscribe. All subscriptions, likes. Apparently the algorithm.
I've thought of something.
What's
Instead of just like people being followers, they get like badges for stuff they read of ours.
Oh wow!
Yeah, so they get like a
put,
Metatalks badge.
program.
Yeah.
Oh wow! There you go, Michelle. I'm sure the idea of people walking around with people, unless it's like Pokemon badges. I mean, what if they beat the fire train? It's like, oh, I beat the Metatalk. I get this little Poke badge now. Oh, that's gonna be good. So we'll work on the badge system.
I'll get you guys some badges soon.
Check the OG Rose website regularly so that you don't miss the 5-minute opportunity to get a badge.
When we drop those badges.
Yeah, when we drop them, the day is nigh. Thank you for your time, everyone. The badges
pulling this like giant badges.
It's like no digressions. It's like sighs and they get crushed. Oh no. Anyway, OG Rose website, YouTube, subscribe, except.